So we'll get started with our webinar today. Welcome, it's fantastic to see so many of you have signed up to our webinar today, and we really hope that the webinar is useful for you. My name is Emily Gardner and I'm going to be delivering the webinar and our webinar series, Keeping Well for Health and Care Workers, and we're so excited to be able to offer this to you today. And we really hope you find it useful, and thank you for taking the time out of your very busy day for joining us today. So, as I said, my name's Emily and I'm an accredited cognitive behavioural therapist. I work for the NHS in London and I've worked as a mental health professional for over 11 years, and I'm trained to deliver specialised therapy with adults who have anxiety and depression. Before we get started, it'd be really useful for you to know how we use the question and answer function, because that's going to be quite useful for us throughout the webinar. We're going to use that to interact. So I'll be asking you some questions, and so I'd like you to use this to answer. We also have a poll, a couple of polls. So if you put your response also here, and if you have a question for us, then we would also like you to use this. So if you click on the box with the question mark for the Q&A now, so if you do it now, it'll open it up for you. And then where you can enter your name. So we'd rather you kept your details anonymous. So in order to do this, click on the blue arrow. And if you would like to put your name, then just put your first name so that you remain anonymous. And then enter your question or your response, and then click on the arrow to send, and then it will be put forward to a moderator, and one of our moderators will publish that. So it won't be published immediately, it will take a few moments, but as soon as it's been reviewed, it will be put forward by the moderator. If you wish your question or comment to remain private, just for the moderators, then if you put private at the beginning of your comment or question, then the moderator will keep it private and they'll respond to you privately. So if that's something you would like to do, then please use that. We may not be able to answer all of your questions depending on time, but we'll do our best. So let's have a go at using this function now. So we'd like to know where you work and also what your role is. So if you go across to the question and answer function and just make a comment of roughly, I mean, not too specific, but in what kind of setting you work and what your role is within that setting, just to give us an idea of who is here with us today. So I will come back to that in a few moments. But first of all, I want to let you know who this webinar is for. Now, it is for anyone, literally anyone in a caring or healthcare setting. So, or someone who is in a caring role. So that includes all NHS staff, or for those of you that might be working in care or nursing homes as well. So let's have a look at some of your roles. So I'm going to have a look now and see some of your responses. Okay, so have someone from Barnet, Enfield, Haringey, NHS Mental Health Trust as an allied health professional, clinical networks, project management role, NHS EI in the medical directorate, Croydon University Hospital as a quality officer. Brilliant. So a number of roles, and I imagine they'll keep coming in now. Occupational therapist, working with people with a learning disability. So already a wide range of roles. CAMS practitioner NHS, social prescriber in community health, social prescriber in community health, placement review officer, face-to-face reviews in care homes, adult learning disabilities. Lovely. So a really wide range of different roles within the NHS and outside. So brilliant. Lovely. So what is this webinar? What are we offering you? So right now we're all going through an incredibly difficult time, and we've never been through anything like this before. but particularly you as health and care professionals, you are taking on the brunt of this responsibility of facing COVID-19, and that the impact of that is going to be significant, as you probably know already. And so we're offering a series of webinars to help you cope with the impact caused by the coronavirus. And the theme of these webinars will be different each week, thinking about the different ways that COVID-19 might be impacting your mental health. And in each webinar, the first step will be understanding. So really thinking about how your mood might be impacted, and also some strategies and techniques to help you improve your mood. So what do you hope to get out of the webinar? So this question really will help us get an insight into what your hopes are for today's webinar, but also future webinars. So again, using the question and answer function, if you just write in there some of your hopes for the webinar, and I'll come back to that in a few moments. So what we are offering today and over the next few weeks is a series of webinars which has been designed to provide you with a toolkit of evidence-based resources, ideas and tools, with the view of these techniques and strategies will help you over the next few days, weeks and months. And the content of these webinars is based on cognitive behavioural therapy, which is a very effective treatment for depression and anxiety. And it focuses specifically on making changes to our behaviour, so the way we respond, the way we deal with things, but also our thought processes and how those things impact on our mood. So today we're going to be looking at two common vicious cycles that will feel particularly relevant at the moment. So we're going to look at a boom and bust cycle, and we're also going to look at a fear cycle. And then we're going to spend a couple of a bit of time looking at some tips and techniques to break into those vicious cycles and subsequently improve your mood. So let's have a look at what you hope to get out of the webinar today. So I'm just going to have a look at some of your responses now. Okay, so we've got to learn how to switch off, to be able to switch off from work, to be able to sleep, and strategies to manage own stress as well as that of colleague. Brilliant. So all of these, except sleep, we're not covering sleep today. We will be covering sleep in a couple of weeks. So I have the dates at the end of the webinar, but yeah, not today, but definitely come back for that one. And just some tips that will help you to manage the anxiety of not being able to see individuals. I rely quite a lot on this for my work, absolutely. To be given some self-help tools on how I can regain some of my confidence as a clinician during this pandemic, absolutely. To be given tools on how to reduce my anxiety levels when working on the wards. Brilliant. So again, some of these we will be able to cover today, and some of these will give us, I guess, a bit of ideas to add to our webinars in future. So we are planning a specific webinar on anxiety as well in a couple of weeks, so we'll come back to that. So another question, we'd really like to hear from you some of the challenges that you have faced since COVID-19 started. So we're going to talk next in the next few slides about some of the challenges, and it'd be good to hear some of the things and some of the difficulties that you've been facing as well. So if you do that in the question and answer now, and I'll come back to that in a few moments. So some of the challenges you may have been facing already, we've had to think about what they might be. And one of them might be an increased workload or maybe increased responsibility. It may be that a lot of your colleagues are off sick or some of them are shielding. And so that means that your workload is increased and the anxiety and pressure and stress involved in that is likely to be impacting the way that you feel. It may be that limited resources, so it might be you're anxious about the limited PPE or that they might run out, and this might be something that you're concerned about. It may be that you've been put under pressure, or maybe your role requires you to make really difficult decisions that are causing you anxiety or distress. Maybe it's some of the things that you've witnessed or experienced, and those experiences have been quite distressing. Or it could be that you're living away from your family or your community because of your concerns about transferring the virus, and that means that you are even more isolated because you're away from your family and you're away from that support that normally would get you through, and you don't necessarily have that right now. Or maybe you've been redeployed and you're working in a new and unfamiliar team. All of these challenges, and I mean this is not an exhaustive list, and we're going to have a look at your ideas in just a few moments, but all of these difficulties and challenges are naturally going to impact the way that we feel. Right now, we're all going through a really difficult time, but even more so, you are doing really important and difficult work. And you've probably found that there have been times when you felt anxious, stressed, sad, overwhelmed, angry, maybe even numb. And these are really normal responses to an extremely challenging situation. And it's understandable that this pandemic is bringing up a roller coaster of emotions, and things might feel really uncertain and unpredictable. You may find that you're more irritable than usual, or even angry about some of the decisions or changes that have been made, that are leaving you feeling really frustrated. You may feel fine one moment, but then the next you're feeling really overwhelmed. Maybe you've experienced surges of adrenaline and that's what's been getting you through. But maybe now, as time has progressed, you're finding that you're running on an empty tank. Everyone is different, and all of you who are here today have probably experienced a number of different emotions, and some of these may feel relevant. Everyone is different, and everyone will experience emotions at different times. So some of you may be struggling really significantly and feel like you have nowhere to turn. And whilst this webinar is intended to be educational and useful, we really wanted you to know where you can turn if you need immediate support. So if you're having thoughts of suicide or harming yourself, don't struggle alone. Please reach out for help. We have the Samaritans who are available any time of day or night, and you can talk to them about anything that's troubling you. And you can call them free on 116 123. However, there is also another service. The NHS and the Samaritans are working together in partnership, offering a wellbeing support line for NHS staff and healthcare workers as well. And they're available from 7 AM till 11 PM, 7 days a week. And the idea of this wellbeing line is to help you to help yourself so that you can continue to help others. So call them again free on 0300 131 7000. So let's have a look at some of your responses to the challenges that you have faced since COVID-19. So I'm going to have a look at some of those now. I can see there's quite a few, so I might not get time to go through them all, but I'll do my best to get through as many as possible. I suppose while I'm talking through, if any of these feel relevant to you or you've experienced a similar challenge, then like it. I know that probably feels counterintuitive to like a challenge, but just I suppose it's sharing the fact that you've experienced the same challenge as well. So managing a work-life balance, so maybe a difficulty with managing that work-life balance, finding a balance between self-care and patient care, absolutely, and that is something we're going to be talking about today, is balancing that self-care and patient care. Not being able to see friends and family and do the activities I enjoy as escape from the stresses of work, absolutely, that is probably a really significant challenge. The coping strategies that we normally use might not be available to us, and that's obviously going to increase our anxiety or stress or ability to cope and function. The main challenge has been a change in role and uncertainty within my role. Absolutely, this will have brought up so many challenges and so many changes within the way we work in the NHS and in other settings as well. Excessive workload, yeah, really difficult, especially if there's not as many people to help and support you. It must be really difficult. The hours are very long, the pressure is very high, everything is urgent. You need to cover for colleagues with kids or who are ill, and there's no way to say no given what we're facing. Yeah, it's really hard, even when you're struggling. Absolutely. Home life suffers, and I have people to look after with mental health issues, etc. in my family, and it's hard to balance everything. Absolutely, this is essentially what we're going to be talking about today, is that absolutely you're all going through so much, and the pressures are there at work, but it's also at home too, and so you're torn in so many different directions. And so the idea behind today's webinar and the next few webinars is to help you find a little bit more of yourself and a bit more support for yourself as well. And being a BAME worker with underlying health needs has been really challenging. Absolutely, I'd love to continue. There's some really good examples, so have a look through at each other's challenges, and as I said, like the ones that you've experienced or you relate to, because we're all going through, in some ways, really difficult and shared challenges. And so if you are experiencing a shared challenge with someone else, let them know. So let's get started then with some of the techniques. But first of all, as I said, we need to understand what's going on. And a cycle that we can often fall into is the boom and bust cycle. And you may find that all of the challenges that we've just talked about are putting demands on you and your time, and the pressures that you're experiencing mean that you are juggling a lot more than usual at home and at work. And when this is the case, we can start to feel that the demands placed on us start to outweigh our resources to meet such demands. And this may result in us overactivating, so pushing ourselves incredibly hard to achieve more and more. And this is the boom part of that cycle. So we push ourselves, we set really high targets, or maybe those targets have been set for us, or as some of you have said, because of other staff not being available because of childcare or illness, that means there's more pressure on you. And so you have to keep going until you're exhausted. And once worn out, our mood and energy crashes, and we then struggle to get going again. So we then are pushed into a bust period, where we then reduce our activity. Maybe we avoid social activities or routine activities. So in a way, we might work really hard in the day and push ourselves, or during a shift, for instance, but then when we get home, we might crash because we feel really burnt out. And because we're maybe not doing so much when we get home, maybe some of those jobs or routine tasks that we haven't been doing start to build up. And this may make us feel guilty, and the pressures can start to build. And so we can then set ourselves really high targets again, because we want to get back to normal, because we want things to be normal. We want to be on top of things. But then because we maybe don't have the energy to meet those targets, or naturally we don't because we don't have enough time, we then feel disappointed and exhausted, which then pushes us deeper into low mood, and then we're back in that kind of bust, low mood, reduced activity cycle. So as I said, it's a bit of a cycle that we can fall into, and we may find that over time we start to feel really overwhelmed by the pressures we are under, and this may lead us to more bust days. So those bust days are days when we find that we're maybe avoiding or withdrawing or reducing our activity. And this may be when you're in your downtime outside of work. It may also be the weekends, or maybe it is starting to happen when you're at work as well. And we may notice that our mood is becoming lower on those days, and the symptoms that we experience can make dealing with the things we would normally cope with pretty well. It makes those symptoms make it really difficult to cope, and we may feel that we don't have the time or the energy to keep up with our usual routines. So we might start to cut things out in our lives that we would usually do. So we might stop connecting with friends, we might stop eating regular meals or preparing meals, we might avoid dealing with bills or cutting out hobbies. And avoiding these things provides short-term relief because we don't have to find the physical or mental energy to do those things. So it's completely understandable that we do it. However, in the longer term, not doing those things reduces our opportunities for pleasure and achievement, and then life feels less fulfilling, and that can make our mood feel worse. On our good days, we might try to play catch up, as I've already mentioned, and we might tackle as many responsibilities as possible, and we may have neglected on our bad days or difficult days. And we may find ourselves pushing ourselves to do what we used to be able to do when we used to feel at our best. And we tend to set ourselves really high, unachievable targets. And we either exhaust ourselves trying to achieve them, or we feel awful when we don't. And this can lead to more significant bust periods, because we then have to rest because we've worn ourselves out. And we may find that it becomes a one step forward, 2 steps back kind of thing. And we may end up worse than we were before. So we're also highly likely to use those boom periods to tackle the routine and necessary tasks. So we're trying to make up for all those things that we put off or avoided or we couldn't face. And any time that we have left for enjoyment or pleasure normally becomes a bust period. So that's the time where we have no energy left. And so we tend to stop doing those pleasurable, meaningful things and instead engage in unfulfilling activities like watching dull television or aimlessly surfing the internet or dozing on the sofa. So if we look at this cycle here, there are 2 areas that we can tackle. And so we can firstly stop reducing our activity on really difficult days. And we don't set such high targets on the easier or quieter days. So we level out our activity so that our good days and bad days have more of a balance. So we can see here on the next slide a common pattern that happens with boom and bust is that we really push ourselves hard and then we have a bust period, and then we push ourselves hard to make up and we then have another bust period, and this kind of maintains itself, this up and down, which is why you may be feeling that roller coaster of emotions where one day you feel really good, motivated, proactive, you're pushing yourself really, really hard, but then the next day you feel completely burnt out. And so this is what our activity levels can start to look like, and this will continue until we do something about it. So what we can do is start to think about breaking that cycle by increasing our activity levels on a bad or difficult day. So we push ourselves a little bit more when we would normally reduce our activity. And then on a good day, instead of pushing ourselves to the max to do everything that we need to do, we hold ourselves back a little bit, almost like we're saving a bit of energy for the next day. We can do this by creating a bit of a routine and schedule, and we need to level out those good days and bad days so that we have more of a balance and try and achieve that consistent amount each day. And we can do this in a really gradual day, just bit by bit, changing things and tweaking things really slightly. And the key thing is setting a schedule and planning the week in advance. So having a look at your work schedule and your personal schedule, and considering which days are going to be the most difficult and exhausting for you, and how can you plan all the necessary routine and pleasurable things that you need to plan in around your work schedule, and think about your week in advance, and then consider what you can fit in where to make sure that you achieve all the things that you want to. And then it's important to follow the plan and not be led by your mood, which is understandable that normally we have been led by the way we feel, because when you get home from a shift at work, you're probably exhausted, and the last thing you want to do is do some exercise or do something pleasurable because you don't have that energy. But when we do that, as we've highlighted in that cycle, is we are drawn deeper into that mood. So it's important to remember to not be led by our mood. So the first step to creating a schedule is to make sure that you're meeting your basic needs. So to continue to function at your best, you need to make sure that you get enough respite, and this means taking regular breaks. And this might feel really difficult if you're under a lot of pressure at work, and it's quite easy to skip breaks and skip your lunch, but this is necessary. It's so important that you nourish your body at regular times throughout the day, and you will be much more effective if you do this. It's important to eat regular, healthy meals. Don't rely on caffeine and sugar to get you through. Whilst it does give you a rush of energy, it wears off quickly. So it's important to remember to choose healthier, slow release energy foods. Most of us have different areas that make up our lives, such as family, work, hobbies, friends. And the advantage of having a number of areas that make up our lives is that we can use them almost as a scaffolding to support us when one of those areas feels really difficult. So in this way, we can think about our support network like scaffolding that supports a house that's being repaired. So we can build a framework, much like scaffolding, to help us cope better with the challenges that we are experiencing. So it can be useful to think about the different areas of our lives and how much time we allocate to each of those areas. So this is particularly important when you're feeling overwhelmed with the demands of work, so that you make sure that this support is in place. So person A has two areas that make up their life: their work and their relationship. So when this person starts to experience difficulties at work, such as the challenges that we've already talked about in our webinar earlier today, and so if this person has challenges at work, they then only have one area to support them. And then it will feel like a really large part of their life is in turmoil. Whereas person B, when they start to experience difficulties at work, they will have a wider ranges of support available to them to help them and to help them cope with the situation that they are experiencing. And if they have all of this area to support them, it feels like less of a chunk of their life is in turmoil. But also there's not so much pressure on just one of these areas. So as we saw in person A, they only had their relationship to support them. So when work was in jeopardy, they were more reliant on the support from their relationship, whereas person B has lots of different areas that support them: their social network, their education, their hobbies and interests, and exercise, for example. So it's really useful to have lots of different areas that support us. So it's worthwhile thinking about your own scaffolding and the different areas that are supporting you. And if you don't have many, then this is where we want you to start thinking about building your own scaffold. What support can you rely on to help you cope with the challenges that you're facing? So sometimes an obstacle to creating more scaffolding is that we can believe that we must prioritise the needs of others above our own needs. And this was one of the challenges that someone was facing earlier, is balancing self-care with caring for others. And so this is probably relevant for you and others that are also experiencing difficulties. And the problem with this is that when we neglect ourselves, we become less able to cope with the things that we want to. And sometimes we may need to remind ourselves that we need to look after ourselves in order to best look after others. So we can look at this a bit like we might look at sharpening a saw. So by taking time out to sharpen the saw, it prevents the edges of the saw from becoming blunt. So, for instance, if we had a really large pile of wood to saw through and we only had a short amount of time to do it, we might feel like that tendency to just crack on, saw through it. But over time, as that saw starts to become blunt, it becomes really tiring and draining and exhausting to continue with a blunt saw. And actually, it starts to take much longer and we're less effective. So it's important to stop, take out time to sharpen the saw. And basically, this means preserving and enhancing the best asset that you have. And that is you. You are your best asset. And as you remind yourself to focus on building your scaffold, you may feel guilty about this and you may feel like you can't or you don't have time. But it's really important to remind yourself that you are your best asset and you can only function at your best if you look after yourself. Feeling good doesn't just happen. Living a life in balance means taking the necessary time to renew yourself. And it's all up to you because no one else is going to do this for you. And at the height of this pandemic, this may not have been possible. It may have been really challenging and difficult to do this. And a lot of what we're talking through may have fallen by the wayside. And some of you may have worked 12 to 15 days back to back. And so absolutely, you were not able to do this. But right now, we're having a bit of a lull, I suppose. And so now is the time to take a breather. We don't know what's coming next. So now is the time to look after yourself. So a good place to start looking after ourselves is by planning in some pleasurable activities and maybe choosing ones that feel rejuvenating or refreshing, particularly after a really hard day. And so things like going on a walk after work or having a long bath with essential oils or reading a good book, for example. But it's important to remember that some of the things that we used to enjoy might not be possible, such as visiting friends or family. And so it might feel like there's no point in doing anything because we can't do the things we want to do. But giving into this will only take us deeper into that vicious cycle. So we need to do the opposite and find a way to do those things that bring us joy. We may need to be creative in how we think about these things, and so that we can still do them within the restrictions that we're under. But it's also important to remember that it might be hard for some of us to feel joyful or feel like we can fit these things in. So if that's the case, then we start small and just try something that gives us a small sense of achievement or pleasure. And anything is better than nothing. So what do you do already, or maybe you used to do it in the past, that makes you feel rejuvenated and refreshed? If you could please share with us in the question and answer. And if you do that now, while I continue on with the next slide. So you may need to adapt some of the activities that you enjoyed before lockdown. So here are some examples of how you can adjust to the lockdown restrictions. So one of the things you maybe used to do was going out for lunch or coffee with your colleagues. And you may have really enjoyed this as a way to connect with and talk with your colleagues and friends. And this may have been a really great support for you. But obviously, because of the restrictions, this might not be possible now. And so it can be easy to feel like, well, there's no point because we can't go out. But actually what I'm saying is there's every point. It's so important that you still get together with your colleagues and friends and have a lunch break. Take some time together, talk, support each other. Another example might be going to the gym. That might have been something that really supported you, to maybe have a swim or a sauna. And maybe what you enjoyed about that was that time to yourself and a bit of relaxation. So think about how you can adapt this. And an idea I had was have a long soak in the bath with some music and essential oils. Maybe it's playing football. Maybe that helps you to get some of that energy, that adrenaline out, and it might support you. It may have supported you in the past. So maybe think about what it is that you enjoyed about that. Maybe it was the fact that you got to spend time with your friends, enjoying an activity that you enjoy. So an alternative is arranging with your teammates to play a video game online together. So let's have a look at some of your ideas. So I'm going to have a look now at the ones that you've suggested. So let me I have to scroll right down to the bottom, so it might take me a few moments to get there. Here we go. Swimming, a glass of wine. I love to swim outdoors. Lovely. We can't swim in pools at the moment, but we can swim in the Thames or other places outdoors. Pampering myself and having a girly night. Also, as I'm going through some of these, have a read through, and if you like them, give them a like as well. If you're going to try them, go for a drive, go for a cycle ride. Some brilliant ideas here. So another thing that we really encourage is exercise. So there's a reason why we were still allowed to go out for 1 hour of exercise in the midst of lockdown. Sorry, I just need a drink. Exercise is one of the best things that we can do for our mental health. It helps to condition the body to handle stress better, and it increases the amount of serotonin that our body produces, and it's been found to be as effective as medication for improving mood. And it doesn't mean that you have to sign up to a gym, not that we can, or start wearing lycra. Just going on a walk is a really great start. So if you can't get going, if you're really struggling to get going, or, you know, I've been there many times after work, it's the last thing I want to do is to get out and go on a run or do some exercise. But actually, it's really important, firstly, because it's energy building. So if you're feeling like you've got no energy and you're too tired, sometimes actually the best thing to do is to go on a run or do some exercise or go on a walk, as it will build your energy levels. So if you can't get going, then try the 5-minute rule. And this is essentially just making yourself go out for 5 minutes and then you can review. So after 5 minutes, if you're still really struggling and you're feeling tired, then you can give yourself permission to stop. But if you feel like you can continue, then you can. And many people find that actually this 5-minute rule just gets them out the door, gets them going. And that's normally the hardest thing, the getting going, getting out the door. So use this 5-minute rule to help you. If you are not sure you can find the time, then maybe it's worthwhile thinking about how you can include exercise as part of your day-to-day routine. So, for example, using exercise as part of your commute. So when I've been able to in the past, I've chosen to cycle to work instead of getting the bus or tube or drive, because then it means that you do it as part of your routine. So it's you're doing the two things at once, and it's easier to fit it into your schedule. So we're going to look at another cycle, and this is a common cycle that you may have already been experiencing in the last few months. So this is a fear cycle. So as you can see, a lot of those life events, those challenges that we talked about, are feeding into this cycle. And so you may be worrying, or may have been worrying, about what if you catch the virus? What if you die from the virus? But also you might be dwelling and worrying about what would happen to your family if anything were to happen to you. Maybe you're worrying about the choices that you have to make and the impact of those, and you may be worrying about what if you run out of PPE, for instance. And these thoughts are very distressing. These worries will naturally impact our mood. So we're more likely to feel anxious or low or guilty. And these will naturally impact the way we behave. So we're more likely to worry more, and we're more likely to drink more alcohol as a way to cope and deal with the stresses we're under. We may start making lists or start checking our body and monitoring our physical symptoms. But naturally, these thoughts, emotions and behaviours are naturally going to impact the way that we feel physically. So our heart is going to be racing, we're going to be feeling more breathless and nausea, tension or sleeping difficulties. And then naturally those are going to feed back into this cycle. In particular, those physical symptoms of breathlessness, as many of you probably know, is a symptom of coronavirus. So if you're already concerned about getting it, and then you start noticing symptoms of breathlessness, that's going to further increase your anxiety about getting it, or maybe thinking that you have. And so that's then going to feed into that cycle and make your anxiety worse. So an experiment for you to try later is to allow yourself to worry about things for just 2 minutes and then reassess how you are feeling afterwards as a result. So rate yourself before and after, and there's some you can rate yourself out of 10. So find out assess how you feel before and then after the 2 minutes, and then have a think about whether it's helping. How do you feel now? And then re-rate your mood and then consider the difference. And did worrying help is the key question. So for a lot of people, they feel that worrying is not particularly helpful. So now I'd like to ask you a little bit about what you're concerned and worried about. So in the question and answer, if you just spend a few moments sharing some of your concerns and worries, and I will come back to them in a few moments. So the world around us is made up of 2 factors, the things that we can control and the things that we can't control. And everything falls into almost these 2 categories. There is a third category which falls in between the 2 areas, and this is our circle of influence. So we can influence a lot of aspects of our lives, but not everything. And it's important to understand the difference between what we can control and what we can influence. So to control means that we have complete authority over it, and there's no ambiguity in control. If we can control something, we can get exactly what we want. But influencing means that we have an impact, but we can't guarantee the results that we want. So we can spend a lot of time worrying about things that we have absolutely no control over. And these are things that we cannot change. So the weather, for instance, is a really good example of something that's completely out of our control. And this is something that we're probably quite used to. The fact that we can't control it. It's frustrating, but we've accepted it. The past can be something that we can really dwell on. And unfortunately, we can't change the past. It's already happened and it's already done. And so dwelling on this will just lead us feeling angry or disappointed. So, for example, you might be worrying about maybe you had the virus and maybe you worried that you may have transferred it onto colleagues or people that you care for. And this may have been something out of your control because you didn't realise at the time that you had it. And this may have been before it was we knew about all of the symptoms. Or you may have been asymptomatic and not realised. And so this might be something you're dwelling on, but it's not something that you can change. It's happened already. Or you may be dwelling on some of the choices that you've had to make. Maybe you had to make a decision about who receives priority treatment. And some of the people that you cared for may not have made it as a result of some of the choices that you've had to make. And these thoughts and dwelling on this is natural, but it's important to remember that you made the best choice you could in the situation you were in at the time. You can't change what has happened, and dwelling on it will only lead you to feel guilty and angry. Maybe you're worried about lockdown restrictions coming to an end, or maybe you're worried about the decisions that have been made by your managers and organisations. And if we spend time worrying about all of these things, all we're doing is causing ourselves frustration, anger and sadness. So coming to thinking about what we can influence, this is our area of influence that's minimal, but it might not actually change anything. So two really good examples are recycling and voting. So these are things that are really important, but on our own, they don't make a lot of difference as they're part of a bigger picture. So voting, for instance, if we're the only person voting for a particular party, that's not going to make much difference. Changing others might also be something that we have a small impact. We can influence, we can suggest, but we can't control others. So for instance, some of our friends or family members might not necessarily be adhering to social distancing measures, and that might be really frustrating to us, but we can't control other people. Our health is another example. So we may eat healthy, we may exercise, but that's not necessarily going to prevent us from becoming unwell or getting injured. And so we can be really frustrated about this if we dwell on it. Running out of PPE, again, for some of us, this may be completely out of our control, but for some of us, we may be able to make some decisions regarding this, but to some extent, supply is often out of our control. So the amount of time we spend dwelling on this is important, and it's important to remember that if we dwell on what's beyond our influence, we can feel angry that things are not changing because a lot of it is out of our control. And then finally, it can be really helpful to focus on what is within our control. And these are things such as our own actions, our own choices, our self-talk, and what we focus our time and energy on. So let's have a look at some of your concerns and worries. I'm only going to have time to look at a couple, but it'd be really good just to get a sense of what you are concerned and worried about. So worried about my manager not letting me to work from home. Absolutely, this is a natural worry to have. Worrying about not coping, money and unemployment, catching COVID, as we've already mentioned. Losing a sense of the familiar and that impacting my mental health. Absolutely. So lots of really relevant worries that we've already kind of discussed today. So what do we do with this idea of control? So the first thing to do is to pick a subject that you're anxious about and focus on what you can control within that. So an example that we've already put together here that we've thought about. So since being redeployed, we may be worrying about some of the patients that we were previously responsible for, but are currently unable to offer treatment to. So this decision, this choice was out of our control, and the fact that we're in this situation is something we cannot change. But what we can control, what may be within our circle of influence, is maybe being able to check up with previous clinic or request an update, but beyond that there may not be much more we can do. However, we can focus on the individuals we are currently caring for, and we can make sure the people we've been redeployed to care for we can make sure that we're meeting their needs. So some take-home messages for you today. So if you're in a boom and bust cycle, aim to achieve a consistent amount each day. Making sure you meet your basic needs, make sure you get enough rest and respite. So taking regular breaks, making sure you nourish your body regularly. Build a scaffold. So remembering that scaffolding, build that to support you during this challenging time. Find creative ways to rejuvenate and sharpen yourself. Exercise is just as effective for medication and improving mood, so make the most of that. And then control the controllable. Don't spend your time and energy on something you cannot change. Focus on what is within your circle of control. So what would be really interesting is for you to have a look at some of these ideas and choose one of them from today's webinar that you will action this week. So choose A, B, C, D, E or F. So if you wish to aim to, they're going to be put in the comments, so just like the one that you are going to commit to try this week. So whether it's achieving a consistent amount, or a routine that meets your needs, or a scaffold of activities, or creative ways to rejuvenate or sharpen yourself, exercise, or focusing what's in your control. So do that now, and then we'll come back to that in a few moments. So whilst you do that, I just want to highlight this is a blank vicious cycle. So have a go at this. There are some prompts there for you to use to help you to understand a little bit about your mood. And then a note to, if you are experiencing symptoms of post-traumatic stress. So some of the things that you have witnessed or experienced might have been really distressing over the past few months. And these experiences might be still impacting you now. So you may notice that you're having flashbacks or nightmares. It may feel like you're right back there reliving it. And you may find that you're having uncontrollable thoughts about the event. So this is a really normal traumatic reaction to a traumatic experience. And these symptoms can and will last for a few weeks. However, if it's been a few months since the event and you're still experiencing these symptoms, it will be really important for you to seek support. These symptoms are easily treated with the right help. So if you feel like you need more support for PTSD or other symptoms of anxiety or depression, then IAPT psychological therapy services are available and free if you feel like you need more help. So they're accessible across England, so you can access them using this link and if you type in your postcode. So please use them if you need it. If you feel like you need urgent support, then we do recommend reaching out to your GP. And if you feel like you need more urgent support or you cannot see a doctor straight away, then the Samaritans, either the normal one on 116 123 or the Samaritans NHS or healthcare workers support line, call them. Or Shout to offer 24/7 crisis support on 85258. There is some more useful resources, and so here, so there's some links to some fantastic resources online. NHS England and NHS Improvement have developed some specific support for NHS staff or healthcare workers, and it's free. So have a look at this slide as this will be useful for you. So finally, coming to the end of the webinar, we will have a couple of minutes for questions. So if you do have a question, please type it into the question and answer box now. And whilst you do that, we'll also open up this link and we're going to post it in the question and answer for you to give us some feedback, because we really would like some feedback from today's webinar. So if you do have any thoughts on what we could do differently, please press on this link and let us know, and that will be available for you while we ask some questions, and that'd be really great. Thank you. So let's open the time up for a couple of questions. We do have a few minutes now, so I'm just going to come across to see if any of you have had chance to put a question in now. Okay, so we don't have any particular questions just yet, but I have one question in mind already for you. So some of you may be concerned about sleep, for instance, and if you're having to work in shifts, for example. So if you are struggling with your sleep, and a couple of you mentioned earlier that you are, we will be putting on a sleep webinar in a few weeks. And we're particularly thinking about shift work and the impact of working shifts and how that's impacting your sleep. So we really do encourage you to sign up to the webinar, which will be useful to you. In fact, I don't think we had the dates in here, so I'm really sorry, that's my fault. I didn't add those, but I'll add them and they'll be added onto the website. So have a look at those online on the Thrive London website. So yeah, there's a sleep workshop coming up in the near future. We've had a question about what a scaffolding is. So we mentioned that at the beginning of the webinar, and it's building in a number of activities to support you. So whether it's hobbies and interests, exercise, support from family members or friends, our partner relationship. So it's just making sure we have that support in place like scaffolding would support a house that's being repaired. It's when our life is in turmoil or our work is in turmoil, as many of us are facing challenges at work at the moment. It's about getting that support in place at the moment. So someone said, what is Thrive London? It's the first time of hearing of it. So Thrive London is we're in partnership with Thrive London to offer these webinars, and it's their website that we're using. We would normally have the link. Oh, it's just been posted here. So if you click on this link, you can use this to find future webinars and the recording of this webinar as well. Okay, I think that's all for today, but I hope you found this helpful, and please book on to future webinars, as we would love to see all of you there. And yeah, we'll see you again next Thursday for preventing burnout. Yeah, take care, and I'll see you again next week.